Welcome back to the CultHousePodcast. I'm your host, Roger Riddell, and my guest today is Corinne Halbert. She's a Chicago area artist whose most recent work is the comic book Acid Nun. You can find it at corinnehalbert.bigcartel.com, along with a lot of other neat artwork and other merchandise. How are you doing today, Corinne?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to this. I've been a big fan of your work since I think maybe 2017 or 2018. One of the last times that I visited Chicago, I was in Quimby's one day with a friend, and I was looking at the zine rack, and I saw your comic Hate Baby. And I ended up picking that up that day.
Oh, yay.
And since then, it's been something that I keep on my coffee table as kind of a personality test for people, because I know that if people look at it when they come over and they're like, oh, this is cool, I know like instantly that that's someone that I'm going to mesh really well with.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I love that. That's a good test.
Yeah. So a lot of your work involves nuns and demons and things of that nature. So where did sort of the inspiration for all of that come from?
Well, we sort of touched upon this when we were messaging a little bit. But I was raised Catholic, in a very loving home. But, I went to Catholic school from kindergarten through 5th grade. And I grew up in suburbs of Massachusetts, which is a very, those puritanical values never have really gone away. And there's a real hustle and bustle, work yourself to death attitude in New England, especially Massachusetts. And I just think, just being raised Irish Catholic, that sort of really puritanical essence that it still remains. It's just like, it kind of fucks you up. For me, I think it really, I have a lot of issues with like guilt and shame and like punishing myself when I really don't need to be. And I mean, I can't put that all on Catholicism, but that is certainly a big factor. So on top of that, I guess I had a lot of really tragic deaths in my family at a young age. So I guess it made me sort of angry at God. So, it's sort of a rebellious thing, sort of like rebelling against Catholicism. But also within that, like, I really love the imagery, the stained glass, all the icons. Like, it's really psychedelic and very dark. And, clearly it made a big impact on me. So I'm kind of obsessed with it.
Yeah, because you combine like a lot of sort of dark and erotic imagery with psychedelic and pop art colors and design features. So I've always really liked that juxtaposition in your work as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's just what I like to draw, it just makes me really happy. I've been drawing since I was like 3 years old, and it's, drawing and painting, art, creation, creativity is like my favorite thing, it just makes me the happiest on this earth. So I just keep relentlessly doing it like a nut job.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned your Catholic upbringing. One of the things that I had also mentioned when we were messaging back and forth was that I had been raised like Southern evangelical,
Yes.
which is like this other I think there's like parallels in it as far as the guilt and shame of everything, but I think at the same time there's like a whole other level of like the puritanical thing to it than there is in Catholicism. And I think there's there's different degrees of, like, I know when I was growing up in the church that I went to, we were always told that Catholics were a cult.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, like their whole stance was that Catholics were worshiping false idols because of all of the saints and, you know, Virgin Mary and all of that, like all of
Oh,
that
wow.
iconography. And
How salacious.
yeah. The thing that always kind of jumped out at me from a young age, I think from the time that I was probably in like first or second grade is the first time I can remember thinking this, is that it started to really kind of bother me that the people leading the church, like the pastor and whatnot, could hold over the sermon for like an hour on Sundays after they were done delivering their message for that week, just kind of like casually guilting people into giving more money to the church, which when
Mhm.
you think about it, that's their income.
Yep. Yep.
But I think that there's this sense of rebelling against that thing where uh um I have like nothing personally against people
Sure.
who are religious. Like I'm sure you don't either. And I do have a problem with this thing where people end up in these leadership roles, especially in like the big Southern evangelical church, where they use that to take advantage of very earnest people who
Mhm.
are trying to actually do what they think will make them a good person.
Mhm.
And so there's a combination of that, and then the combination of the excitement from that sense of like guilt and shame that's instilled very early on, that I think makes art like yours very interesting to me. Like I've always really kind of gravitated toward art that is to a sense, I guess, sort of obscene
Mhm.
or feels like it's something that I shouldn't be looking at, you know?
Sure, sure, and that's hard to do these days. I feel like everybody's seen it all, and I'm glad you said all that because part of it definitely is the hypocrisy. I mean, to just make people feel so guilty about their sexual identities, proclivities, everything, and then you have these disgusting priests like molesting children. I mean, you can't really get more hypocritical than that. I mean, it's disturbing. And there's been quite a bit of that being unleashed, specifically in Massachusetts, over the years, priests being discovered to be doing horrible, horrible things. Definitely rebelling against that. It's like, so you're telling people they can't have sex before marriage, but what are your priests doing? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah, and like I think for me too, when I got to the point where I was a teenager, at one point my mom had like married a guy who had been an evangelist, and he turned out to be just kind of like this abusive like monster.
Ugh.
And so that I think also uh kind of like fuels this whole um I guess like sort of inner attraction to this art that is like blasphemous and sacrilegious.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know a couple of people like in my extended family that, there's one guy, I won't say who it is, but he's horrible, and I don't know exactly what religion he's in, but he's some sort of makeshift pastor now, and it's like, you're abusive to your wife and your children, and it's heartbreaking, and she keeps trying to leave him, but then she keeps going back to him, and I don't know. I just feel so bad for that family unit. And I think he really hides behind, that he found God or whatever. And it's like, I don't think so.
Yeah, yeah, I think that it's just one of these things where people who want control over other people see uh large swaths of people who very earnestly believe in a thing and see an opportunity to kind of take advantage of that sometimes.
100%, 100%. I use it as a mask.
One thing that I wanted to ask you about too, because your work kind of reminds me of this, is if you were ever familiar with like the unpop art movement.
Unpop. Anybody in particular?
So it was a thing that Boyd Rice did. I think
Oh, okay.
maybe about the early 2000s. So I had gotten introduced to it when I was an undergrad around like 2005. Because that was right around the time that MySpace happened.
Okay.
And I had gone through this whole thing where I was like, let's see what different people I can find on here. And one of the people that I had found on there and sort of ended up becoming friends with, and I don't remember what exactly the process was that led to this, but it was Gidget Geen, who had been the original bassist for Marilyn Manson before they ever got signed, when they were just like a local band in Florida. And so he had been part of that movement during the time that he was like a mortician's assistant.
Oh, wow.
And basically the whole movement was taking obscene and sacrilegious things and offensive things, but presenting them in like this very colorful uh, sort of like commercial pop art kind of approach. And in some cases it was really interesting, and in some cases I think it went a little bit too far.
You know, it's
Yeah.
like, I love Johnny Ryan, I love Mike Diana, but it has to have like, I don't know. There's a lot of artists on Instagram now that are like watered down third generations of those two artists, and I don't like any of that stuff. Like, I don't like things that are cruel for just no fucking reason at all. You know what I mean? Or just like really mean spirited, but they don't have any substance to them. You know what I mean? So I don't know if I'd like that or not. You know, like I said, I love Johnny Ryan. I mean, he's really sticking his finger in the wound. But you know, even some of his stuff, I'm like, oh Jesus, Johnny, you know. But he's such a brilliant cartoonist, you know. It's kind of different when you look at someone who's been doing this for, you know, 30 years, and he's such a brilliant cartoonist, you know. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of weird on that stuff. Like, I don't know. I don't like stuff that's just like shocking for shock's sake, usually. I mean, it really depends. I'm kind of, you know, I'm kind of snobby. Like, I'm very particular about what I like and what I don't like, you know.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat, because it's like shocking for shock's sake is uh appealing when you're 13,
Yeah,
but I think that if you've got like any sort of uh intellectual desire behind the art that you're interested in or that you create yourself, you eventually move beyond just wanting to shock for the sake of it.
exactly. Yeah, I feel like it needs to have some meat and potatoes for me to like want to take a bite out of it. You know what I mean? I feel like I don't know that I've seen much of that guy's stuff, but I feel like I might have, and I don't know if it's really my cup of tea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you also have a gallery show coming up at the Seventh Corner Gallery, right?
Yes, I'm really
Yeah.
excited about that because there's amazing artists in there. I'm a huge fan of Mitch O'Connell. I've been a fan of his for years. Love Nick Pyle. Kawhi Suga's great. Everybody in it is like really awesome. So, and Tim Seeley is the one that put it together. And my husband and I are friends with him, and he's just such a cool guy. I really, really loved him. He's working with his brother, and then they have another partner. And he's one of the, you know, like pure gems in the comics industry. It's like every time I turn on my internet and go into Twitter, it's like there's some horrific thing happening in the comics world, you know, like, I don't know. But anyways, Tim rules.
Yeah. I mean, the Warren Ellis thing has
Oh
really
God,
bummed me out in
no.
this last year.
So disturbing.
Yeah. Like I was a big fan of Transmetropolitan, and like now that all of this stuff has come out about Warren, uh I have very mixed feelings about liking that book now, even though I also feel bad that Derek Robertson is lumped in with having been part of that book, because it's much as a big a part of his career as it was Warren Ellis's.
Yeah, I can't believe Image is doing this. It seems like business suicide. I mean, I don't really know what they're doing, but it seems weird. I mean,
Yeah.
there's like 60 women have come forward. 60 women and non-binary folks have all come forward and said he's a big old creep, you know?
Yeah.
Like, do
Yeah.
you really need to make that book? Can't he self-publish it if he really needs to make it? Like, I don't know. It
Yeah.
seems really weird.
Yeah. Well, that book, Transmet was actually like,
Well,
I
the
think.
new one fell
Oh
or
yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
They're re-picking up that one that dropped off in like, what is it, 2007, 2008? Like, I just mean, does Image really need to make this book? Like, I just don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think at that point it's probably best, both from not just from a business standpoint, but just from like um a decency standpoint, to just distance yourself from that.
Yeah, that's what I would do, but I don't know.
Yeah.
There's plenty of other artists making incredible work that they could work with.
Yeah.
I know Image is one of the only publishers that's like creator owned, right?
Yeah, yeah, because
Yeah.
that one was like 7 artists from Marvel back in the day split off and launched it, and everything that
Yeah.
they do on there is creator owned. And
Yeah.
sometimes that, for the most part, that works out really well, I think. But then sometimes you have books that start out that are really interesting, and then they just kind of like disappear out of nowhere.
Hmm. I mean, this particular move, just to me as a woman, it feels very disrespectful to women in the field. And, it's alienating to other creators. And like, what are you going to, have him at your table at an expo? And then how many people aren't going to go because they don't want to be near that fucking guy, Like, I don't know. It just seems very disrespectful to women, to me. I don't know.
It's great that they've been kind of weeding these people out of the industry in the last several years, though.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's like there's good and bad to all this stuff, but if it gets rid of some predatory assholes, that's great. Just get rid of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, and speaking of Tim Seeley, I recently went back and checked out his book Hackslash when he did the
Oh,
Kickstarter
nice.
for that. I had a friend who worked with him at Devil's Due back when the book was published by them,
Oh,
and
cool.
that friend, about a decade ago, we were at C2E2, and he was like, "Hey, you should check this book out." And I don't think I was like in the right mood for that kind of book at the time.
Yeah.
But when I saw that Kickstarter go up, I was like, I should finally check this out, and I haven't been disappointed.
He's great. He's a great writer, great artist, and he's just a cool, nice guy. He's got a wife and kid, just really cool guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of your recent series of paintings was Mutations.
Yeah.
What was some of the inspiration behind that?
Well, that kicked off right at the beginning of the pandemic, and I have like some anxiety and depression type stuff that I have to deal with, and the pandemic was really stressful for everybody, and a lot of my painting is driven by like what makes me feel good, and at that particular time, I just was like especially so just needing to just do what was feeling really organic. Like I wanted to use colors that were really bright, that were gonna like make me really happy. And yeah, I don't know. I just started doing it, and then it was so fun. I just kept making them. I made over like 50 paintings last year, which was pretty incredible. And I sold a good chunk of them. I mean, I sold at least like 35 or more of that particular series. Um, so that was really really awesome, and it just felt so organic. And I use a lot of vintage magazines as reference. Like I'm really sort of stuck in a time period, like when I was growing up in my Irish Catholic upbringing. My grandfather's Ukrainian, but my grandmother was 100% Irish, and she was the very religious one. We lived with my grandparents, my mom, my brother, and I, from the time I was about 3 till the time I was about 11. And so we lived in their house that they never updated. So like everything was like, you know, the 1960s, like big pop flower wallpaper. Like the living room was like orange and brown, you know, like the kitchen was like acid yellow, like just like really just 1960s amazing. And so I just have such a fondness for that whole time period, that whole aesthetic. It just burned into my soul, you know. I collect vintage magazines. I could collect vintage smut, but I also collect like women's magazines. And so I like to look at references from those to create my paintings. I love women. I love looking at women.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that you know, your family lived with your grandparents from, you know, those ages too, because it's from the time that I was 3 until I was 12, me and my mom and my sister lived in like a single wide trailer behind my grandparents' house after my mom got divorced. So my grandparents had like this house that was built in like the I want to say at least like the 50s or 60s, but like the kitchen had like the old like wood paneling in it. It was very kind of like this old like vintage design kind of house. So it's
Awesome.
kind of like a little bit of parallels
Yeah,
there.
that's a super parallel because yeah, my parents got divorced when I was almost 3 years old, and that's why my mom, my brother, and I moved in with my grandparents. So and almost the same ages and everything too. That's wild.
Yeah. Yeah, when you were doing the mutations, was it kind of difficult to do these multiple perspectives where you've got like say like two faces kind of like glitching together, or like multiple parts of two different faces glitching together in one painting?
The thing about it is like the thing that was like really enticing to me about it is that there's like a little bit of chance involved, and I think that's the thing that like can give it such life. So yeah, I didn't really stress me out. I sort of looked at it like a challenge or like a fun thing, like a puzzle or something. I like that element of like, you know, not being like, I'm going to draw a dog exactly like this. Like, you know, there's this element of like things are going to change throughout. There's a little bit of a risk involved. So I found it very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, I always have this thing whenever like I draw or paint where I have sometimes a little bit of trouble getting to that point where I can let go and like not try to over focus on the details and just kind of embrace the risk and let that happen. But I find that when I do that, that's when uh, things actually come out looking the way that I want them to.
Yeah, it's so funny because like if we try and exert too much control over something, then it gets in your head and you're like, I'm never gonna be able to do this. But if you get into that flow state, you know what I mean? Like, and it's you can't always be in that state, but that's what I'm always shooting for is like to get into some sort of flow state where I'm just like, you know, I'm just kind of going with the flow.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of good philosophy for life too. I mean, you can never exert too much control over anything without ruining it.
Tell me, I'm trying so hard. It's much easier for me to do in my art than my life. I mean, maybe that's why I spend so much time doing my art because I'm trying to avoid fixing my life.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes just setting aside that time to create things also uh, allows some space to breathe and kind of figure out the little things in life too.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. I mean, that's a big part of why I'm working on Acid Nun. It's, you know, it's completely fiction. I want it to be really dark and fucked up and scary and fun. You know, it's like a nightmarish acid trip, but there's definitely some stuff that, you know, from my life that is, you know, gonna bleed in there. And it feels like something I need to do right now. You know, like I just feel so compelled to make this book. It's like I want to make this book. I want it to be done, and then I can. It's sort of part of some sort of healing process, I guess. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, and you're working on the second issue right now. how long do you plan on having the series go on?
Right now, the plan is 3 issues. I'm working with a publisher, which I'm super pumped about. I haven't dropped the name yet just because like I haven't signed a contract, and I'm a real proof in the pudding type gal. So as soon as I sign that contract, I will be shouting it to the mountaintops. I just like, I don't know, I've had stuff like fall apart in the past. So I like to, I don't want to go telling everybody something and then it's not happening. I don't really have any reason to believe it wouldn't, but you just never know what life is going to throw at you. So right now the plan is 3 issues, and then it'll be collected into a graphic novel. I'm self-publishing the single issues, but this publisher I'm working with is going to do the collected book. So I'm shooting between like 120 to like 130 something pages. I have commissioned 6 artists to do pinups. Some of my faves, some of my friends that I really love their work. And there's going to be an accompanying essay that I'm going to write that's going to go in the back. So I'll definitely be going over my 120 pages. I just want it to have a spine, so you have to have a certain page count to get a spine. And so I have the story is like, I know what the story is, it's all in my mind. My writing process is really weird. I like honestly just put these giant pieces of paper on my desk, and like it's like it's really looks like a serial killer or something. I can't do like a script. Like I just don't work that way. Every time I've tried to do a script, it's just not my natural state. Like I have I like to say a more feral process. And that helps me to inject this sort of like organicness into it. So yeah, I'm really pumped. And the only other thing, I don't know if I'm gonna do it for sure, but in Preacher, how Glenn Fabry does those beautiful paintings that split up the Steve Dillon artwork. Like each chapter will start with one of Glenn Fabry's like incredible paintings. I'm thinking about doing like maybe 6 of those as well. So I want it to be really fucking sweet,
Yeah, I'm excited for that. Both the
Oh,
next
thank
2
you.
individual issues and the graphic novel.
Oh,
I can't wait to
awesome.
see all of it.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. It's something I've wanted to do forever. And I didn't realize I had all this like deep conditioning and like all these like fears and like self-sabotage stuff I was doing. So like I had been going to therapy for almost a year, and it helped me kind of like recognize some of that stuff. And I'm finally like pushing through my fear and just going for it, because what's the worst thing that can happen? Like you work hard on something and no one gives a shit, so I could live with that. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go for it.
Yeah, no, that's always a great mindset to arrive at. Like kind of similarly, I've always had this thing with all of my creative efforts where I'll build bridges and then I'll get halfway across the bridge and I'll be like, okay, I guess this is the bridge, and then just jump over the side of it. And then I'm like, well, I need another bridge now.
Gosh, isn't it funny how we just keep doing the same thing over and over again?
Yeah.
God, it's so annoying. But it's great when you start to recognize that stuff, because then you can like, you might not be able to stop it, but you can at least like, lessen it, be on the lookout for it, like change the direction of it, like I think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. One of a thing that I did recently was I did a 6-page horror comic with a friend of mine named Mitchell McNaughton that's getting published in a Kickstarter anthology called Monkeys Fighting Robots.
Oh, cool.
And
I think I've heard of that for sure.
yeah, they're putting out their 3rd issue. And with that, you mentioned that you've never really enjoyed writing scripts. And because this was like, it was something that I adapted from an essay kind of thing that I wrote, I guess maybe like 7 or 8 years ago, that was about this recurring nightmare that I used to have in my like early 20s. And rather than like writing out the script, I just kind of like put together these plot points from the essay itself, and then sat down with my friend Mitchell and kind of like went over what the progression of the art through this might look like through like a few different variations. And then was just like, just do whatever you feel like works best, you know, with these plot points. And then he brought it back to me, and then I just kind of like figured out the text of the story from there, kind of like the old Stan Lee like Marvel method of writing a comic.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Congrats. That sounds so fun.
Yeah, it's just interesting that with the medium there's all these different ways to approach it. There's no one right way to make a comic.
Totally. And there's so many different kinds of comics. And that's why it's like, if you don't like something, it's like you don't have to read it. There's so much other stuff you can read, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's I think a lot of people looking from the outside in don't realize that there's such a diverse array of genres in the
Oh,
comic world.
absolutely. And they're like even some of these YA authors like Raina Tellem, however you say her last name, like one of the most hugely published authors in the world. They did that book Smile, and um, so it's just like, when you see stuff on Twitter where people are just like, comics is this and comics is that and comics is doing this and comics isn't doing that. It's like, do you really know what you're talking about? Like I just feel like it's such a big melting pot that it's like there's so much going on. There's like, DC Marvel, there's alternative comics, there's queer comics, there's kids comics. Like there's just so many different, arms of it. Like it's just weird that people like to make so many blanket statements about it.
Yeah, yeah, I mean it's kind of like art as a whole. Like anytime that I just hear someone defining what art is, it's like, can you really just like put this blanket statement on what art is across the board? And I think that that ultimately kind of hinders art in the long run.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like it can be anything you want. It can, I mean, the high art world's so funny. What did they there was some I think Italian artist made like $18,000 on an invisible sculpture. And then they did that, somebody like duct taped a banana to the wall and that sold for, whatever. I don't know. I mean, I get where there's a line where you're like, okay, what the fuck? But you know, having a very open mind about the incredibly vast amount of ways that people can express themselves is probably only going to behoove anyone, just having an open mind.
Yeah, yeah. One of my favorite art museums out here in the DC area is the Hirshhorn. And about 7 years ago, they had an exhibit that was focused entirely around the beauty of destruction.
Oh,
And
cool.
one of the installations in it was just this grand piano that someone had taken an axe or something like that to. And so it's just this smashed piano. And a lot of people would look at that and just see junk, but it's this thing that's used to create beauty, but it's just in this pile of rubble. And there is something beautiful about that.
Absolutely. It sounds very cathartic. Like you could just be like, oh, I wish I could have smashed that piano. Sounds fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's just always kind of interesting to think about things running the gamut from like a Van Gogh to a Pollock to Frida Kahlo, where you've got the mural art and it's very I don't know if self-deprecating is the right word, but very self-explorative. Yeah.
She's incredibly personal. I love her stuff so much.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah, and just that whole backstory of her and her husband was always fascinating to me. Just
Another
their the
asshole.
dynamic, yeah, yeah, the dynamic of their relationship and how that fed her art.
I mean, what happened to her growing up is like one of the most horrific stories anyone has as an artist. She got impaled through her pelvis with a freaking pole. I mean, that is so disturbing. And like the recovery, I mean, think about it. Like you'd be in the hospital forever now for that. I mean, back then she was just recovering for years and years and years. And she never fully recovered, you know? So
Yeah.
seeing those pictures of her doing those paintings in the bed is just so inspiring, you know, to take all that pain and suffering and just pour it into your art. And then to make your art so beautiful, it's like that's really cool.
It's fascinating that so many artists are from um, just these crazy backgrounds, and I feel like every sort of very notably creative, mind like that always has some sort of darkness to them.
Yeah, really a lot too often, and it's sort of heartbreaking sometimes when you find out. You're just like, oh my god, no wonder they did all that crazy dark intense art, you know. But that's part of living, and I mean, I think it's great to be able to share that with the world, because if you're lucky enough that your art like impacts anyone or touches anyone else, I mean, that's such a powerful form of human communication, you know.
Yeah. So you worked at Quimby's for a really long time, and I know that that is very much a sort of local staple of Chicago. Um, what do you think has sort of endeared that store to the locals there for so long?
So I'm still there. I'm leaving at the end of July. I gave my boss like a really long lead time just because like the training process there is just like, it's just really a steep process. So I just wanted to give her enough time to get someone in there and trained. And but I absolutely love Quimby's. It's one of my favorite places in the world. If you're ever in Chicago, you gotta go. You would absolutely love it. Um, it's been around for almost 30 years. I think the 30-year anniversary is in the fall. So the original owner is Steven Simbursky. He actually has his own Quimby's in New York now. He was abroad forever, and then he just came back a few years ago. So the two stores are definitely connected, but they're really kind of separate entities. Obviously we love Steven and Steven loves us. His store is just zines and books, so it doesn't have comics, so it's a little bit different. But I like to call him sometimes Papa Quimby, because he's he birthed Quimby's. And then Eric Kersimer, who owns Chicago Comics, is the current owner and has been for over 25 years. And basically, you know what consignment is, right?
Yeah.
So anyone can get their work into the store as long as they follow the guidelines. And since it's been around for so long, and it's been like the destination to send your zines, it's just like got this incredible collection of zines for sale from all over the world. And then my boss Liz is really, really incredible at curating the books that she orders, new books coming out, because we some people think it's just a comic shop or it's just consignment, but that's not true at all. It's a bookstore first and foremost that has zines and comics. And so the combo of my boss Liz like curating all that awesome new stuff in there, and then all the zines and comics, it's just like overwhelmingly inspiring. I mean, I feel like it'd be, if you're into the kind of stuff we're into, it's like almost impossible to go in there the first time and not come out with like a big stack of stuff, It's not the type of store that's like the best to be like, I need this particular thing number one. Like it's better to go in there and just discover what is in there, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's one of those stores where every time that I've ever gone in there, I haven't had any expectation
Oh,
of
so you've
what
been.
I might. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Because
Sorry.
that was where I found
Oh yeah, you
Hate
started out
Radio.
with that.
Yeah.
My brain is like, I seriously have like horrific, like my memory from like smoking so much weed and having so much anxiety. Like my memory is like decimated. It's sort of disturbing, but it is what it is. Apologies.
Oh no, that's totally fine. Like I have where a lot of times, especially around like this time of day, my mind just kind of like starts to like blank out a little bit on
Mhm.
occasion, where it's
Mhm.
just like, all right, I've been awake for like this whole day, I've done a ton of work, uh I need to like unwind at some point. And I don't really want to think about anything, you know. But yeah, like every time that I've gone to Quimby's, I haven't gone in there with any expectations, but I've always found really cool things. And it's like,
Way to do it, baby.
yeah, like especially like kind of alternative bookstores like that. Like I think it kind of falls into that category where um, it's got a lot of stuff that you're not going to find at like your typical bookstore
Mhm.
that you go into, but there's a lot of like very interesting sort of niche things, and it's the kind of store that I think people just sort of build a community around.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's so cool being able to just be part of that community. I feel so honored to have been there for this long. Obviously during the pandemic, no in-person events, but my boss has been doing like a zine club online, and she did a very small amount of online events. It's just so much work for her, and like if you're not having an in-person event, the likelihood of the store benefiting from it at all, and she already has way too much to do anyways, you know what I mean? So she did a great job of she did a few, but I'm sure as things start to open up, the in-person events will resume, and that's such a wonderful thing for the community to be able to come and see the Hernandez brothers, or like Dan Klaus or Trina Robbins, or like just these like incredible cartoonists and authors come and speak to the community. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think maybe there's even like a little bit of a sort of facet of the whole thing where it's like the bookstore equivalent of an oddity shop on some level,
Oh,
with like
totally.
the yeah.
Those are like always my favorite types of shops. Like everything we're talking about, like used bookstores where you don't go in anticipate, like you don't go in looking for a particular title. I mean, I'm not going to go into like a used bookstore in Wisconsin, that's just got the stacks of filthy books and like expect to them to have a particular title. You have to just, you're just digging for gold, baby. That's what I'm always trying to do.
Yeah, and speaking of like oddities type stuff, have you ever been to the Mutra Museum in Philadelphia?
No, but I want to so
Oh.
bad. That's like one of my I've never been to Philadelphia at all. But I want to go to that museum. I've heard about it for years.
Yeah, like that's another place where I went to it just based on word of mouth, knowing that I was gonna see like some weird and crazy shit, but with no expectations of what it would be. And so much of it was just like fascinating.
That's so cool. I'm gonna get out there someday. I love museums. Like anytime I go to a city, I'm trying to go to the museums, and then like any Quimby's like shop, and then if you can find like a great antique mall or used bookstore, that's where I'm gonna try and go.
Yeah, no, out in the Midwest. So I'm from Kentucky originally, and there we had peddlers malls. And I
Oh,
don't know if they have those in
I've never heard of that.
Illinois. It's basically like you know how when Walmart switched to where they opened all these super Walmarts and they left the old school Walmarts just kind of abandoned.
Yeah.
So in Kentucky, in a lot of these places where like a Walmart or like an old grocery store like a Winn-Dixie was just kind of left abandoned when it closed up, there were these flea markets that came in and established these sort of indoor flea market spaces where people could rent out their own booths. It's kind of like the dirt mall from Mallrats.
Mm.
And there was one in my hometown that me and a few friends used to go to all the time just to look around at like all of the weird stuff that we could find. Like some booths would have these weird sort of um, airbrushed like knockoff band t-shirts.
Oh,
Uh,
nice. Oh God, I love that kind of stuff.
and then you would find like these odd pieces of wardrobe, like crushed velvet jackets with like gold sequin pinstripes.
Ooh, I want to go.
And
Come
then there'd be like
on.
random comics and random pieces of furniture. And
That's
people,
awesome.
yeah, people would rent out a booth to sell like their whole like toy collection.
Oh my God. Yeah, my husband and I have finally been able to start going to like, there's a cool flea market called Wolf's Flea Market, and we've gone to a couple antique stores now. We're really lucky. There's this really cool place in Berwyn called Real Art Collectibles. It's like real, like a movie, like REEL. And they open up their warehouse and they do this warehouse sale. It is so cool. It's just like, piles and piles and boxes, and we'll go for a couple hours. He's looking for different stuff than me, you know. He's looking for like VHS and stuff, and I'm looking for vintage magazines and comics and things like that, books and stuff. And they also have giant movie posters. They'll have like literally like they're like this high, just like hundreds of these incredible, all different sizes, like, you know, some that are like over 6 feet by 8 feet, like the real deal movie posters. And I mean, they know what they have, you know what I mean? So it's not cheap. But if you go during the warehouse sale, everything's like 50% off. So you can get some really good deals.
Yeah, I love the old like the theater posters and the subway posters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just have like thousands and thousands. And every time you go, it seems like there's more. And I'm like, Jesus, where does this guy get all this stuff? It's incredible.
Yeah, it's always kind of easy to overlook the real like treasures that you can find in places like that. Like even in like a Goodwill store or a place like that.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
my husband always has a stuff at those.
yeah.
'Cause he's always looking for VHS, and it's sad because it's finally like, you know, more often than not, you know, they might not have any now, but like for years and years and years, he's found some killer stuff at those types of places.
Yeah, I had a friend out here in DC who just randomly went in a Goodwill store one day and found a stack of comics in there that were like $1 each, and they were all like these really high value issues of like Spider-Man and X-Men and the Hulk. Yeah, like he found uh
That's the
I,
dream, right?
yeah, like a few of them were like the Phoenix issues of the X-Men, and like he found the first Venom from Spider-Man,
Holy shit! Did he sell
and
them or keep
they
them?
were oh he bought them all for $1 and kept them, but I think he like just sent a few of them off to be graded because he was just like, I should just go ahead and do this before while I'm thinking about it, you know.
Damn.
But it's just like
Wow.
the such an insane find.
That is insane. Yeah, you hear every once in a while someone like finds an Egon Sheila drawing, you know, that's worth like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're like, damn. I found things that are worth like, you know, $100, but that's incredibly rare. It's only happened like once or twice, you know. Um, so it's not, you know, I found stuff that's like definitely worth more than what they're selling it for, but like definitely nothing more than like $100, you know.
Yeah, I've known people throughout when I was younger in Kentucky who would just go to yard sales looking for treasures like that because people throw away things without knowing what they have all the time.
I feel like that's the type of thing you can't look for,
Yeah.
you know? It's so funny. I was in my yard and I was like, "Oh man, I want to find a four-leaf clover so bad." And I was like, "I'll never find one." And then I looked away and I was like, I give up." And then I looked back and I wasn't looking for one anymore and I immediately saw one, you know? There's some sort of weird law of attraction there.
Yeah, you know, the leprechauns felt you willing it into the universe.
Right? Yeah, once I stopped looking, I found it.
Yeah. So we talked about a few of your zines. So I've got a few of the other ones that we could talk about real quick too. Um, so first up, Nuns in Space Fighting Crime.
Yeah, I did that with Mark Peters. He's just a really awesome guy. He's a writer, lives in Chicago, super friendly, super funny, really get along with him. And I don't normally illustrate other people's comics just because it's, standalone illustrations, I'm down to get commissioned left, right, and center if it's the right fit. But comics are such an overwhelming process and there's so much to them. I'd really kind of rather work on my own comics, you know what I mean? But he came to me with this idea and he really played to my strengths, which I thought was really cool. Like he's basically sort of wrote a story tailor-made for me. And I was able to put my own creative input into it. He was like, make the alien something you love. And so I was like, oh, a fox, So it was a really good natural process. And I really like the end product. We might do another one at some point. I'm a little bit like super busy at the moment, but there's a possibility there'll be a second issue.
Yeah, I'd love to see that too. Like that's one of my favorite zines of yours that I have.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, he's such a good writer. He's so funny.
Yeah. So this one, way down below.
Yeah. Yeah, so that is I did this series of paintings. It's a Triptych of Hell. I read, so my memory is so bad, I'm so sorry. I read this sort of epic poem that is in a Dante's Inferno kind of style, but it predates Dante's Inferno. It's by an Irish monk, and it was like even more gnarly in metal. And so I made these 3 paintings based on this Irish monk's Dante's Inferno-esque poem of going through hell. And I had spent so much time on them. Like each one I spent like, I don't know, like 50 hours on or something. I spent a lot of time on these paintings. So I wanted to collect it into a zine. And then I just kind of added some other paintings that, were satanic and demonic and, my usual fare.
Yeah. And there's one other zine of yours that I've bought before, but I don't have a copy of because I gave it to a friend. But it was one where all of the art in it kind of explored like different standards of beauty, I think.
Oh yeah. Okay, sorry. So not honey, but ladylike.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was I was doing these kind of like, since I collect vintage magazines, they always have like the most amazing old advertisements in them, and they're like by today's standards, they're like completely offensive. So I find them hilarious. So I just kind of like, I kind of wanted to like make a joke out of those. So I sort of tweaked them to be like this like hilarious like horror type thing.
Yeah, when I was an undergrad, my major was communication, and in one of the classes that I had, there's a vintage good housekeeping article that we discussed, and it was kind of I guess sort of the discussion was centered around changing societal standards, because this was an article that was basically about how to be a good wife.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things was always make sure that the kids are bathed and in bed by the time your husband gets home, because he won't want to deal with them. And then one of them was make sure that he has a warm dinner. It's just like so backwards.
Jeez, man. I mean, it's good to be good to your partner, but you don't want to be like a subservient, like, I don't know. Yeah, the tone of them is always like, so you're worthless and your husband is everything,
Yeah.
It's just pretty irritating, but it's also kind of funny because you're like, really? And also, I mean, obviously in a lot of households back then, I'm sure that was the standard, but I'm sure there was men that were fucking pussy whipped by their wives. Like, give me a break. You know what I mean? Is that what was really going on? I don't know. I don't buy it.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that the this image that people put forth on the outside was really what things were like inside every home.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure everybody was like a raging alcoholic, smoking like 100 cigarettes a day.
Yeah, no one had that perfect Leave It to Beaver household.
No way. Mm-mm. That's why the magazines are so funny, because it's like it's such a facade, and you can just see it. I mean, I'm sure people could see it back then, you know, like it's just like it's really funny to me. I can't get over it.
Yeah. Well, I've had you for about an hour now. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Thanks again for taking the time to come
Thank
on
you
the
for
show today. Is there anything else that you want to get out there before we wrap things up?
I have, you've mentioned my URL to my big cartel. My website is CorinneHalbert.com, which is just CorinneHalbert.com. And that's got like a link to everything. I post the most on Instagram. I have a Twitter, but I'm really bad at Twitter. I just retweet things for the most part.
Yeah, well, thanks again for taking the time. It was a pleasure to get to talk to you.
Yeah, so awesome talking to you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.